Michael Venom Page versus Ian Garry is the only fight to make for those two after UFC 299, and I'm going to break down why I think that's the case in this video. I'm getting to this a little faster than I expected because I hadn't seen anyone else talk about this specific matchup until earlier today. I saw Michael Bisping came out with his own video talking about how these two should be matched up next, but I actually called for this fight yesterday in the video I posted after UFC 299. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, that video is performing like it's the first video I ever put out. So I have no idea what's going on there, but I wanted to do a dedicated video about this fight specifically because it really needs to be discussed. I cannot think of a more exciting match for either one of these guys than the other. And after UFC 299, I've seen a whole range of opinions about what should be next for Michael Venom Page. So I'm going to shoot some of those down and give you the reasons why this is the only choice that makes sense. Let me start by shooting down MMA Guru's choice for MVP next, which was Stephen Thompson. I understand that these guys both have similar styles, and it would be exciting to see which one of them would come out on top in a fight, but Stephen Thompson has already said emphatically that he does not want to fight MVP. I'm not sure if they're friends or if they've trained together or whatever it is. Maybe he just knows that that's a really bad matchup for him, but he has made it very clear he wants nothing to do with that fight. So even if they offered it to him, I doubt he'd accept it, unless he really had no other choice. But you also have to consider, and this was pointed out by Kamaru Usman during his podcast with Henry Cejudo, that you might think that that would be an exciting fight, but because the styles are so similar, it might actually end up being a really boring fight, much worse than you would think it would be. In addition to that, from MVP's perspective, there's really no value in fighting Stephen Thompson with regard to moving himself closer to a title fight. That fight would effectively be a lateral move for him at best. And there's nobody out there right now seriously thinking about Stephen Thompson as a title contender. However, there are a lot of people thinking about Ian Garry as a title contender. So yes, it would be an interesting fight. It would be potentially a fun fight, but it just doesn't make any sense and it doesn't advance anything in the division at all. So with that said, now let me move over to Ian Garry and shoot down why Colby Covington isn't the right answer for him either. I do not think for a second that Colby Covington has any interest at all in fighting Ian Garry. Obviously, Ian has come out very hard for that fight. He's pushing for it. That's what he wants next. But Colby Covington is very protective of his own career, and he does not want to give Ian Garry, somebody who talks the way he does, somebody who's anti what he stands for, all the rest. He doesn't want to give that type of person an opportunity to get a win over him and potentially embarrass him. And I would be very excited to see that fight. I would love to see that fight. I just don't think Colby Covington's going to accept it unless the UFC forces him to, and they certainly could. So I don't want to sit around waiting forever for something like that to get made when it's probably not going to happen. And that is why I believe we should all just scrap that idea from our minds for the time being. Now, here are the reasons why this fight between Ian Garry and MVP makes the most sense. First of all, I think everybody automatically believes that MVP is probably one of the most elite strikers in the division already. And of course, Ian Garry would passionately tell you that he's one of the best and most elite strikers in the division as well. So one of the main reasons that these two should fight each other next is so that we can settle that and understand who is actually the better of the two. Along that same line, they are different types of strikers. Unlike a matchup between MVP and Stephen Thompson, where it's so similar that they might cancel each other out, a fight with Ian Garry is a different stylistic matchup on the feet. Secondly, Ian Garry has already basically called for this fight. And I don't mean that he has called out MVP directly. I'm referring to the fact that he called out Stephen Thompson, who is basically a style clone to MVP. So we already know that Ian Garry wanted to prove himself against that style, and it didn't really seem like Stephen Thompson was all that interested, so let's go ahead and give him MVP instead. The third reason that this fight needs to take place is that there's no equivalent alternative for either one of these guys. There's not a single person that would be as exciting to watch them each fight. Let's face it, if Ian Garry fights Colby Covington, it's going to be nothing more than Colby diving in for shots and Ian trying to stay on the outside and just clip him. There's a high possibility that that fight is actually pretty boring in the end. But I don't think a guy like MVP is going to give Ian Garry the opportunity to settle into that sort of mode he likes to do. And I think he'll force him to fight, which would be a nice change from the running away he was able to do against Jeff Neal. So the way I see it, let's take two of the guys who are highly regarded as some of the best strikers in the division. Let's settle that out and see who really is the best. And then once one of them rises to the top from that person will either be first or second in line for the next title shot. And depending on who it is at that point, we might get to see one of these guys against an elite grappler and see if they can survive that. So to sum it all up, Ian Garry versus MVP is the only fight to make Forget about Colby for Ian. Forget about Stephen Thompson for MVP. Those fights don't make any sense or are likely not to happen. So let's just jump on this opportunity while both of these guys are free and let's get it booked. That's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more in the future. As always, I appreciate you being here and I hope you have a great rest of your week.